So, imagine you have produced a really successful Christmas movie. Millions of people love it and you earned millions of dollars with it. What is your next step? Well, what if you just produce exactly the same movie once again, just with a slightly different plot and in a totally different city? For example, in New York. Yeah, that is exactly what happened in 1992 with Home Alone 2: Lost in New York, the sequel to Home Alone. Kevin McCallister, you may remember him, is not forgotten at home this time, but runs after a man in a coat who looks like his father at the airport and ends up on the wrong plane. Not to Florida, like the rest of his family, but to New York. Home Alone 2 is, and many people may not even know that, the start of a whole series of sequels to the original film. There are a total of 6 films under this label, most of them really bad, don't watch them. But this does not apply to the second part. Some say it was even a little better than the first. Today, we will have a look at the famous filming locations of this famous Christmas movie and let's try to recreate Kevin's journey through the big city. Time for a new movie location tour from New York.
Rechts abbiegen, dann Ankunft am Ziel.
Sicher ist sicher. So, here we are. Welcome to... no, not New York City. If you are wondering now, where the heck is he? This doesn't look like New York City. Well, it's not. It's Jersey. Yeah, I booked a hotel here in Jersey, the neighboring city of New York City. And for only one reason, here's a little trick if you want to do this road trip yourself. The hotels in Jersey are much cheaper than in New York City. I took a look at the prices in New York City. The hotels are like 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 times higher than in the whole United States. And I thought, no. Just because it's New York City, no, I'm not gonna pay that. So I'm staying in a motel in Jersey, which is much cheaper. You have to like those kind of places. It's always a bit creepy in those motels. There are also some spooky people around here. The alarm also went on. I don't know what's happening there, I don't know. What's happening right in front of my door? Okay, I hope I will survive the night. Anyway, I have to sleep a little bit. We see each other tomorrow from New York City. Hopefully. Bye-bye. Well, and to get from Jersey City to New York City, we have to cross the Hudson River to the other side, and this works best with the so-called PATH train. There are various stations in Jersey City where it leaves, for example at Dornell Square. Then you buy a Metro card from a machine like this at the train station. This is what the Metro card looks like. This works for buses and trains throughout New York City and also for the PATH train from Jersey. There are different models of this card, single cards, weekly cards, and ones that can be recharged. You can check for yourself what's the cheapest for you. Well, and the PATH train then takes you directly to Manhattan. By the way, this is the new stylish train station hall of the new World Trade Center, but more on that later. So, here we are. I made it. I'm in New York, lost in New York, alone in New York, just like Kevin McCallister. And I thought we start a little shooting location tour just like the movie. We start with a few scenes that we can see at the beginning of the movie when Kevin walks through the streets. In one scene we can see Kevin talking to a very huge Santa Claus, and all of that happens right in front of a diner that is right behind me.
Well, and this is it. The famous scene we all know from Home Alone 2, and this is the famous scene today, 31 years later. And we can see the famous diner where Kevin and the giant Santa Claus are standing right in front of is still here today, 31 years later. And there is one specific reason for that. This restaurant here, the Empire Diner, is a quite traditional one. It was opened in 1946. It closed and reopened several times since then, but the building itself, including its historical construction, is still here today. This restaurant, over the years, also became a hotspot for celebrities. For example, Meryl Streep was here, Madonna, Julia Roberts, Steven Spielberg, Barbra Streisand, Kate Winslet. All these famous people are said to have dined here. And what is also quite interesting, this famous restaurant can also be seen in all sorts of films, besides Home Alone 2, also in Men in Black 2, and in all sorts of other films and television series. What I think has changed a little over the past 31 years is the environment around this restaurant. In the summer, as we can see here, the diner obviously also offers outdoor dining, which was not the case when Home Alone 2 was filmed. And what we can also see in the movie is a slight hint of something like a pillar on the roof of the diner, and that was the Empire State Building. Yeah, they had a model of the Empire State Building up on the roof for many, many decades. This unfortunately is no longer here today. But if we take a look around this building, the houses that can be seen in the background are still here. What is not shown in the movie scene, unfortunately, are the skyscrapers we can see on the left side of the picture. So I'm not really sure if they used to be here 31 years ago. Would have been interesting, but unfortunately we cannot really prove that. Here's the whole scene from a slightly different perspective. Here, once again, the little Kevin stands in the big city in front of this huge Santa Claus, in front of the Empire Diner, and here we can see quite well the facade of this building is exactly the same as it was back then. The buildings around it still look the same as they did 31 years ago. The wall behind the Empire Diner was decorated with a bit of street art today, but otherwise hardly anything has changed here, so I would say let's move on to the next shooting location.
The next place on the list is not that important, maybe you don't even remember it. Anyway, it's a good chance to do a little sightseeing tour in Chinatown. That's where we will find the store where Kevin buys the fireworks equipment at the beginning of the movie.
Well, and now, unfortunately, comes the big disappointment. This is the fireworks shop as we know it in the film, and unfortunately, this is how it looks like today. The fireworks store no longer exists today, and I actually had to check 2 or 12 times to see if this was really the store shown in the film. The internet, however, says it must have been this shop, and you can still tell it from very small details. For example, on the left side we can see this entrance door. It's red today, the entire frame is red. However, we can still see small carvings up here above the door. Even if they are in a different color, we can still see it's still the same door. And what we can also see in the film is this apartment above this shop with a fire escape. It's still here today, 31 years later. What looks completely different today, however, is that building here on the right. It's covered with all sorts of stuff. However, there is an entrance door on the right side here, and also this entrance door still looks exactly the same like it did 31 years ago. Before we leave, maybe 2 or 3 fun facts about this district here, Chinatown in Manhattan. This neighborhood is actually home to the largest ethnic Chinese population outside of Asia. Almost 90,000 people live here, and the history of this area dates back to the 19th century when Chinese immigrants came to the USA and then gradually settled in this area. If you want to go on a culinary discovery tour here. This is definitely the perfect place for that. There are all sorts of grocery stores, noodle houses, souvenir shops, bubble tea shops, and so on and so on. And who knows, if you search a little, you might also find a fireworks store.
The next place on our list is a very sad place, and you might already know what I'm talking about. Of course, I'm talking about the famous World Trade Center, which also is shown in the movie Home Alone 2. Kevin McCallister goes up the famous Twin Towers. He's standing on the roof, he's taking pictures, and he's really excited because of the great view from the World Trade Center. Only 9 years after this scene was shot, the famous Twin Towers of the famous World Trade Center collapsed after a terrorist attack with 2 airplanes. I know exactly what I did that day. I know exactly where I was, and I was watching TV like for hours to see the news. But the place I've never been so far is the place where all of that happened back in 2001. And that is the place right behind me, where you can see the World Trade Center Memorial.
It's a really strange feeling standing here after all those years. At the exact spot where the famous Twin Towers once stood, you can now see 2 huge gorges, 9 meters deep, the same size as the 2 Twin Towers, and with a large pool of water in the middle. And there is a wall surrounding this memorial with the names of the victims of the terrorist attack on it. This memorial was designed by the architect Michael Arad and opened 10 years after the attacks in September 2011. In 2014, a museum was added where you can see numerous relics of 9/11, for example this completely destroyed fire truck. And around this monument, the city of New York has built its new skyline in recent years. The most impressive building is probably the new One World Trade Center, which is basically the replacement for the 2 destroyed Twin Towers. It's 541 meters high, has 94 floors, and is the 7th tallest building in the world. The World Trade Center buildings 3, 4 and 7 were also rebuilt, and World Trade Center number 5 will follow in the coming years. And what is also new is the train station under the World Trade Center, which I already mentioned in the beginning, also called Oculus. This train station was also completely destroyed in the terrorist attacks, and its design is intended to commemorate this day. By the way, the One World Trade Center now also has a visitor platform again, the One World Observatory, but it's not like what you saw in the Home Alone movie. You can't just go to the roof, it's more like a glazed floor where you can look through panes. But if you want, you can of course enjoy the view over New York there, and maybe also take a picture with your Polaroid camera.
So, after Kevin walked through the streets of New York for some time, he of course needed a place to stay. And where did he find this place to stay? Right at the famous Plaza Hotel, known from the quiz show Ding Dang Dong.
Yeah, this is probably one of the most important locations from the movie Home Alone 2. This is the Plaza Hotel as it looked like in the film, and this is how it looks like today, 31 years later. This building was built in 1907 for $12.5 million in the French Renaissance style, and in the years that followed, the Plaza Hotel established itself as this famous luxury hotel, which today is a truly landmark of the city of New York. All sorts of celebrities stayed here, and all sorts of films were filmed here, including Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest, or Crocodile Dundee, or Home Alone 2. You may remember the scene where Kevin runs through the lobby and then he runs into Donald Trump. The reason for this is that this hotel belonged to Donald Trump from 1988 onwards, and according to rumors, this scene only exists for one reason, and that's because Donald Trump insisted on walking through the picture, otherwise there would have been no permission to film. What is also quite interesting, this Plaza Hotel is today no longer the hotel that we know from Home Alone 2. In 2004, this building was sold to an investment firm for $675 million US, and back then they had the plan to close this entire hotel and turn all the hotel rooms into condos. However, there were quite a few protests in the city, so a compromise was agreed upon. Only the apartments overlooking Central Park and Fifth Avenue were converted into condos. The rooms with a slightly less beautiful view are still used as a hotel today. There used to be a total of 850 rooms here, but today there are only 348. However, they are still all very expensive. I just had a quick look on what the prices are. Today you pay around $1,500 and $1,800 US for a night in the Plaza Hotel. So it's a bit different league than my shabby motel in Jersey City. Okay, let's take a look at the building itself. We see in this scene that not that much has changed. This fountain, for example, which we see here on the left side of the scene, is still here today. And we can also see that the building itself hasn't changed that much. There used to be a lot of flags hanging on the facades. These poles are still here today, but somehow there are no flags hanging on them. But what has clearly changed is this porch in front of the Plaza Hotel. Apparently, this was built in recent years. It didn't exist back then. Here we can see the building again from a different perspective. It looks really beautiful, and nothing has changed 31 years later. This is how it looks like today. It's also quite interesting that this very modern looking skyscraper on the left was already there back then. The Plaza Hotel is reflected in it. Isn't that beautiful? This is the so-called Solo building, and it was built in 1974. And today there are various companies in this building with their offices. This building wasn't entirely uncritical back then when it was built. This whole design was a bit too fancy for some people, but I think it's actually quite beautiful, especially with the reflecting Plaza Hotel, right? Let's take a closer look at the entrance area of this famous hotel. We have already seen that the porch did not exist back then. However, the entrance area still looks the same as it did 31 years ago. We still have that beautiful red carpet that is rolled out for the guests here. There are still those beautiful pillars with the little clocks on them. The doors look a little different, and also this canopy has apparently been changed over the years. It was white back then and the Plaza was written on it. Today it looks totally different. And here a little pan to the right. Everything that existed next to this entrance area is apparently also still here today. For example, you see this door with this ball lamp that you can see here. Even that still exists today, 31 years later. So now it's finally time for Cedric to bring us the pizza, which we then will eat while driving in a very expensive limousine. Yeah, this scene was shot right in front of the Plaza entrance area with this beautiful skyline in the background, with all of those beautiful skyscrapers in the background. We see the fountain again on the right. We can see all sorts of high-rise buildings in the background. If we look very closely, we can see that basically all of them are still here, just like in the film. A few little things have changed. For example, there is now an Apple store on the right-hand side, which didn't exist back then. Yeah, but otherwise, the forecourt of this hotel looks pretty familiar. So, and before we move on, and before the first person writes the comment, Matthias, why don't you actually go into the Plaza Hotel? Well, I've read up on this topic, and it's apparently the case that you can get access to this hotel as a visitor, but the scenes of Home Alone 2 were filmed in the lobby of the hotel, and you can only enter the lobby if you're a hotel guest. And to be honest, these impressions from the outside are enough for me. So I would say let's move on to our next filming location.
Okay, loyal viewers might already know this problem. Every shooting location tour also comes with a little disappointment, and well, now the moment has come. There are two places in Home Alone 2 that are really important for the movie, but that we cannot visit today. And that's not because I don't like to visit them or something like that, it's because they don't exist in New York.
Well, the first place I'm talking about is this famous toy store that we can see in the movie, Duncan's Toy Chest. Those scenes were never filmed in New York City, they were filmed in Chicago. Yeah, the building actually exists, just not in New York, but in Chicago. Fortunately, we have the opportunity to take a look at this building on Google Street View. And this is what it looks like today, 31 years later. The historic facade is still here, however, it's not a toy store today, and it also wasn't a toy store back then. All the Christmas magic was only set up for the movie Home Alone 2, it's not here in reality. However, there was a real existing store that was the inspiration for Duncan's Toy Chest. And that was the Schwarz Toy Store in New York. Back then it used to be on 5th Avenue and also played a major role in the Tom Hanks film Big. However, for Home Alone 2 they didn't film here. They filmed in front of this building in Chicago. And the interior scenes of the toy store of Duncan's Toy Chest, where Kevin receives the turtle doves, for example, and where Marv and Harry hide in the toys, all of that was filmed in the Uptown Theater. So this whole scene is actually pretty fake. However, if we compare the film scenes with reality, then we can see not that much has changed on the facade of this building. This bow is still here, those funny windows with the arches on the left and on the right are still here too. And if we take a look at the reverse shot, we can also see not much has changed here. We can see those pillars here in the movie, and we can also see them here in reality. They belong to this building on the other side of the road. Well, and now the second big disappointment, and now things get really weird. It's Rob McCallister's house. Yeah, you may remember the big construction site where the big showdown occurs at the end of the film and where Kevin once again tricks the gangsters. The funny thing is, in the film there is an address revealed, and at this address we will also find houses that look quite similar to Rob McCallister's house. However, the house that we can see in the movie doesn't exist in this street. And that's because this is a studio set. The inside and also the outside scenes were filmed at Universal Studios in Los Angeles. There is a street there with all sorts of buildings that look a bit like New York. That's why the street is also called the New York Street. And that is also where Rob McCallister's house is, and where all the scenes were filmed. So unfortunately, nothing we could visit here in New York. It's a bit of a shame, but I still have a few more famous places on my list.
What does exist in New York, of course, is the famous Central Park, the place you can see right behind me. We will find a lot of scenes here that we can see in Home Alone, and this is also the place where Kevin meets his new friend, the Bird Lady.
Yeah, and this is probably one of the most iconic scenes from Central Park that you can see in the movie Home Alone. The historical bridge in front of which the pigeon woman always stands. This is what it looks like in reality today, 31 years later. The bridge is the so-called Gapstow Bridge and was built in 1896 based on a design by the architects Howard and Caldwell. Yeah, and as you can see here, not much has changed in the past 31 years. You can see here and there are some bushes or trees that were not here back then. And here on the banks of the small pond, a fence was built that apparently also wasn't here back then. Otherwise, this path around the pond is still here. Also, those benches are still here at the side of the path. It still looks as beautiful and idyllic as it did 31 years ago. In this scene we can see the bridge again in close-up. The pigeon lady and Kevin obviously were standing on the icy water. This is how it looks like today. And then I tried to find this perspective. We see a lantern on the left, then the bridge in the background, and behind it many large buildings. If I'm not wrong, it must have been filmed from over here, because here we can also see this lantern on the left, which is still here. The path bends to the right, but because of all the trees and leaves, unfortunately we cannot see the bridge and the buildings in the background today. The cool thing is, from Central Park, we have another great view of the New York skyline, including the Plaza Hotel, as shown in the film. This is what it looks like today, and we can also see that the skyline still exists in this form today. If I'm not mistaken, a building has been added, this small pointed skyscraper that can be seen here. Apparently it didn't exist back then 31 years ago. And in this scene we can see the Plaza Hotel again. I think it's the last scene of the movie where Kevin runs to the pigeon lady to give her the turtle doves. If I'm not wrong, it was filmed from over here. We can see this path with the curve and also the benches that are still here on the left side of the path today. And this is the pigeon lady once again in close-up. I'm just showing it to you because of those little hills you can see in the background, those rocky hills. They really exist here in Central Park. There are a lot of rocks and little hills here. It looks quite interesting, so much wild nature in the middle of the city. You can see that in the film and also in reality.
Not far away from the bridge, actually just around the corner, we will find the next famous shooting location. That one over here. The famous tunnel that we can see at the end of the movie Home Alone 2, when Kevin gets kidnapped by the two crooks and then the bird lady helps him right over here.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this shooting location, when I started to compare the scenes, I noticed there is something wrong here. Let me explain what I mean. This is the scene as we know it from the film. Kevin runs into this tunnel and this is what it looks like in reality today. You could say, yes, it looks like it does in the movie, but if we take a really close look, we can see something is different here. Firstly, we see a staircase next to this tunnel on the left. This is also the staircase where the pigeon lady will later stand to throw pigeon food at the two gangsters who kidnapped Kevin. This staircase does not exist in reality, there's just bushes there. Okay, now you could say maybe it was just demolished. Yeah, maybe. But if we take a look at those scenes here, the pigeon lady throws the bird seed at the two gangsters, we can see that also something is very different about the tunnel itself. Look at this facade, it looks much rougher than it is today. Also, the bottom of this archway looks completely different than it does here in reality. And that's when it struck me as strange, because this is actually quite unusual. On my filming location tours, and I did a lot of them, I've never seen that a facade of such an historic building was changed in such a way. And according to my research, this tunnel was also not really renovated over the past 31 years. And then I tried to read a little bit about what could possibly have happened here. There are also a few film forums that speculate about it, and their theory is that this scene was actually filmed in a studio. That this entire tunnel was simply recreated exactly except for a very few details, such as this exterior facade here. By the way, that would also mean that this staircase was never here 31 years ago and that it was simply built in the studio, but I'm not really 100% sure about this theory either. There are a few other clues, for example, this scene here where the gangsters have Kevin in tow, then they walk through this tunnel here, and here we can see the tunnel seems much shorter than it is in reality. This could simply have been due to the camera setting, but here we can also see that on the right and on the left side of the facade that these stones look completely different. They are much rougher. So if the theory is correct, then this tunnel has been recreated very faithfully to the original. They really put effort into every little detail, but at one point or another, they didn't really pay attention, obviously. Well, and also the stairs that you can see in the background also in the movie look much more ornate than they are in reality. For the sake of completeness, I show you 2 or 3 more scenes from this tunnel. For example, this one. Somehow they filmed from the bushes onto this tunnel. Yeah, here too we can see that there was a staircase on the left and a lantern on the right, but it was much further into the bushes than it actually is in reality. Yeah, and also the tunnel itself was much less overgrown with bushes and stuff like that. In this scene, Kevin has his foot stuck on a rock. If this wasn't filmed here, then this rock definitely was the inspiration for this scene. And here we see Kevin and the pigeon lady once again. In close up, once again in the background we can see the stairs that go up there, including a lantern that's also up there. None of that is visible here today. By the way, a little hint: if you have the plan to climb through those bushes like Kevin did, don't do it. The city of New York has a huge rat problem. I even got one on camera. They run all over Central Park here, and they also run through those bushes here too all the time. So better stay out of it.
What we will also find in New York Central Park is the ice skating rink where Harry and Marv steal a lot of scarves and hats. And all of that happens right over here.
And this is the scene from the movie. Harry looks at the ice rink where Marv is skating around. This was filmed from over here. The ice rink we see here is the so-called Woolman Rink, named after its founder, Kate Woolman. It was opened in 1949, and in the history of this ice rink, we once again meet Donald Trump. He was responsible for the renovation of this ice rink in 1986, so that a few years later, Home Alone 2 could be filmed here. But not just this film, this ice rink can also be seen in many other movies, for example in the film Love Story from the 1970s and in Serendipity from 2001. Harry tries to convince Marv that what he's doing here is total nonsense and that he should stop stealing people's scarves and hats. That was filmed from over here. Once again we have a beautiful view of the New York skyline in the background. The camera pans from the right onto the ice rink, and this scene is super interesting because here we can see that the New York skyline has changed a bit, at least on this side. We see 1, 2, 3, 4, several large high-rise buildings on the right that were not there back then. We see the Essex House on the left. It was already there back then and it's still here today. And also the two buildings to the left and right of it were already there back then. The building behind the Essex House, however, seems new to me. Yeah, a whole series of huge high-rise buildings have been built here over the past 31 years. And with this pan to the left, we can see the Essex House once again on the right. And also on the left side, there are small high-rise buildings sticking out here and there that obviously weren't here back then.
Okay, boys and girls, the sun is slowly setting, so I think it's time for our last shooting location from New York's Central Park, which is the scene when Kevin is being chased by the crooks and then he hides in a coat. All of that happens right in front of a fountain, which is right behind me.
Yeah, but before we take a look at the fountain, let's first take a look at the first scene that we can see from this place in the film. We see these stairs and the camera pans to the left. And here we can see this was not fake at all. This was exact the same location that is also shown in the movie. The original location was used, no studio backdrop. Everything here looks exactly the same as it did in the film 31 years ago. The archways on the left, the stairs, those bollards here and there with all those ornamentation, they are all still here. By the way, this is the so-called Bethesda Terrace, also designed by the architects of Central Park. A place where people should come together. When I was here, yoga was done here, there were dancing classes around those stairs. Well, and in the movie Home Alone 2, this terrace was used as a hiding place for Kevin, who is hiding here in a carriage. The camera pans to the left. Here we can already see the carriage in which Kevin is about to hide, including the horse and these beautiful archways in the background. This was filmed from here. And in this scene we can see Kevin running through these archways and coming out the other side. That's an amazing scene, isn't it? Look how the sunlight shines through the archways, really great. Yeah, unfortunately I can't recreate that with such perfection, but what we can see is that not much has changed here. Even this ceiling that we can see in the film, which is very ornate, is still largely preserved in this form. What is no longer here are those round lights that we can still see in the film. Apparently they were removed at some point. Well, and here finally it is, the fountain I just mentioned. In front of it, the carriage in which Kevin will hide. This is what the scene looks like today, 31 years later. We see nothing has changed. The fountain is still here as it was back then. By the way, there is a figure on this fountain. This is a piece of art called Angels of the Waters, and it was designed by Emma Stebbins. A nice, quiet place where many people spend their afternoon, really beautiful and green. Well, and then Kevin hides in the carriage, which then drives away, and the carriage takes this way up here, and as you can see here, yes, also this path still exists today, 31 years later. And this is the last scene I want to show you from this place. Once again, we have a great view of this part of Central Park. We see the beautiful fountain with the statue. And once again, I wasted many pointless minutes trying to figure out what that beautiful, interesting, tall, pointed building is there on the left. This is the San Remo, a luxury apartment building. What the building on the right is, you can find out for yourself. We don't see these two buildings today anyway, because everything here is beautifully green, but instead we have a wonderful sunset here today.
There is one last shooting location I'd like to show you. It's also one of the last scenes from Home Alone 2. Kevin meets his mother again, and he does that right in front of a huge Christmas tree, right in front of Rockefeller Center.
Yeah, and I have to say, this is really impressive. This is the scene as we all know it from the film, and this is how it looks like today in reality. I will show you this building in a few seconds in all its glory, but first let's compare the scenes. The Rockefeller Center was built in 1926, and it's a complex of 20 buildings, including 19 high-rise buildings, and the most famous building is the so-called Comcast building. It's this huge skyscraper here, 259 meters high, 70 floors, but only the 32nd tallest skyscraper in the city of New York. Anyway, it's really impressive. This is the reverse shot. Kevin is standing in front of Rockefeller Center looking at the Christmas tree before he's about to meet his mom again. That was filmed from here. Here we can see that this flower bed in the middle looks a little bit different than it did in the film. I don't know whether the construction was changed here or whether they just built benches that look somehow different. I don't know. It looks a little different, and the shops around it have of course also changed a little bit over the past 31 years. And for the sake of completeness, here's the beautiful scene from the film. Kevin meets his mom again in front of the beautiful Christmas tree in front of Rockefeller Center. I almost have to cry a little bit because this was really a beautiful scene, and well, all of that was filmed from over here.
So, here we are, back in Jersey. That was a long day, that was an exciting day, and I also hope you liked my little trip to New York. I hope you liked my shooting location tour of Home Alone 2. If you did, then please leave a thumbs up. You can also hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you won't miss any upcoming video. And if you'd like to support me and my work, you can also do that, for example, on Patreon. The link is in the video description down below. Then you will get videos before everyone else and also exclusive stuff. For example, I will tell you all the addresses of the places I showed you today. I will tell you in which beautiful hotel I'm staying here in Jersey, and I will tell you with all the details how exactly you can get from Jersey to New York with the PATH train. If you're interested in that, please subscribe to my Patreon. So that's it for today. I wish you a Merry Christmas now. I hope you have some great time with your families and friends or alone, whatever you like. See you then, have a safe journey. See you next time. Merry Christmas, bye bye.